Hey there, welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daychuk with Queen Bee Creations, and as per usual, we are doing an experiment. We're going to play with something. Now, I have a bunch of broken boards from a Taekwondo club. So these are the boards that you use for board breaking. They're pine, but they're very light. And so you can see it's kind of uneven. I sanded the top and I've painted it all black. I drew out an image that kind of fits onto my board. And I just have a little stylus, so it's got a little round ball end. And what I'm gonna do is just kind of press over the image. I'm thinking that this will sort of let me, in essence, see the image. Let me just kind of check. Okay, yeah, I can kind of see that. And I'm gonna trace around it. Now this is just an image I kind of freehand drew. So just made up out of my head. You could, if you're not comfortable doing that, well, shoot. All right, I had marked off my page with the size of my thing, and then I painted the wrong side of my design. It's like tall edge, short edge, and it goes opposite, so that figures. All right, well, we'll just kind of change the pattern a little bit on the fly here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to just kind of embed the image into my board, and I'm going to bring you in overhead for a little bit of a close-up for the next steps while I make adjustments to my pattern. All right, I can kind of see my design, my outline here, and I'm thinking I have too many curves and I might have bit off a little bit more than I can deal with, but we'll see how it goes. We're experimenting. This was the picture I drew. It's a work of art. And I have a wood carving tool. Now, these are not awesome tools because I don't carve wood as a general rule. The last time I used this, I was carving rubber. But I've just got the kind of the V end. And what I'm looking at doing is first, just kind of going along, and I might just try my first strokes going with the grain. This one's going against the grain. That's obviously going to be harder. Oh yeah, with the grain. Look at how easy. I like that. So I'm just going to do the outlining first. And the idea here is that anything that we don't carve is ultimately going to remain black. So we get to, let me straighten out my line a little bit here. All right, let's see how I do going against the grain. All right, that one's going to go slower. So I want to just make sure I keep my hand out of the way. I have a Band-Aid on already. It's not from this. It's because I was removing the corn kernels from a cob of corn earlier today. And I used to do it with a knife. And my husband got me a special kernel removing tool because the knife made him think I was going to cut myself. So I've never cut myself with a knife, but I did with the little tool that was supposed to save me from, from that. Okay, so this is tougher against the grain, but I think maybe, okay, maybe little strokes like this might work better. These extra little marks aren't going to matter because I ultimately have to remove all of that from this. So I just want to get the outline because that's where I want to stop. So again, this is the with the grain part, so this one's easy. I'm creating this kind of square so that in essence I create a frame around my piece. What I am finding, is that, I mean, it's definitely easier to just keep turning the board when I hit sections and just kind of continuing to rotate around to be able to get it. So let me get the rest of the outline done, and then I'll show you the next step in the plan, and we'll see how this all comes together. Now, just to be clear, you didn't have to paint your board black, but it does give you a better idea of what you want to remain black or whatever color, and what you want to be removed. So I want him to stay black, which means I need to remove all of the black coloring from around him. And that's the next part of this, is just carving away all of the wood. This blade doesn't seem very sharp. Okay, might have to switch. But this is where we're just carefully going to remove all the wood from around our objects, in this case our whale, and just exposing the plain wood instead. Nobody said that this was a quick craft. Now that I've gotten this carved out, so you may have recalled that there were little fish up here and bubbles, and then I realized, okay, they spout into the air, so I can't have fish up above. I don't know what I was thinking, but I caught it and I fixed it. Now, the next thing that I want to do before I start touching up the black is I do just want to lightly take some sandpaper, and I just want to go over the surfaces to be able to get any rough edges gone. I get people aren't going to be handling this per se, but I also just don't want any jagged edges. So it's going to help me just kind of clean them up. Now, before anybody asked, you could have just drawn the picture on and carved. You didn't have to start off by painting it black. However, if you are challenged in, you know, looking at the picture and figuring out which parts are going to be one color, which parts are going to be another color, this painting it black is a great hack to be able to figure that out. Then you can see which parts are going to remain one tone versus another. Now, you could have started off by painting it whatever color you wanted to do, or you could have stained it all over in one color stain if you were going to two-tone stain it. So you have options in terms of that. It just makes the as you're going piece easier to be able to tell what's going to be what color. So I'm going to finish sanding this, and then I'm going to get a small brush and I'm going to touch up my black paint because I do want it to be black. And then we'll come back for the next step. But, you know, this is just a light sanding. I just want to get any of those rough edges gone so that there's no splinterage happening on my art piece. So it's a very quick 220 grit, kind of nice and easy sand job. All right, now that I've got it all sanded and I've got the paint cleaned up a little bit, you can see I left little streaks to be water. You can, here's your choices, here's your options here. You could just seal it as it is. So you could use a top coat, you could use a wax, you could use a hemp oil. This is open paint, so we still need to seal it. So you could use any of those options. Or you could choose to paint the background if you wanted. You could use like a light, maybe a light blue wash if you wanted, because this is kind of water and sky. So you could stain this open wood with a light paint wash if you wanted. Just dilute the paint of your choice. Or you could stain it. That's what we're gonna do. Now, you could use a wood stain. This is such a tiny project that for me to do that, I'm not opening a can of stain just to use a tablespoon or two. In which case, we're just gonna make a quick stain. You guys, if you followed me, you've seen me do this before. This is just instant coffee from the dollar store. It doesn't matter what brand. Oh, Lord, that smells. I'm not a coffee drinker, so it's just those granules. Fresh Park coffee smells really good. I just don't really like the taste. Sorry, coffee lovers. I'm a tea drinker. But I just have some warm water. I'm just stirring it up and it's ready to go. I tend to mix it up fairly light because then I can add as many coats as I want, so I can darken it. Now here's the thing. I can, in fact, just paint right over my wood too. I mean, over the black paint. It's okay. It's just gonna make it a little bit darker. And that all works. I don't wanna keep going over it because this is DIY paint. I've reactivated it. But, you know, I don't wanna have to get out a brush and paint really carefully around all those little swirls. But when it's wet, it gives you an idea of what it would look like dry. So DIY paint dries lighter, and the coffee stain will dry a little bit lighter. So we're just staining. We are still going to need to seal this afterward. So what you will do is just add on your first coat, let this dry, and then add as many coats as you want to get it the look that you want. I'm kind of liking this, however. I kind of like that look of it. So I may just stick with this one coat, in which case, you know, really my next step is let it dry. Now that this has all dried, I'm just going to seal it. You could use a polyacrylic, you could use a hemp oil. I'm just using a clear wax, and I'm just going to wipe it down over my entire surface. Take a dry cloth, just a lint-free rag, and wipe it back afterward to remove any of the excess, which is kind of important because I've got little grooves in this. But then we're done. I mean, you can leave it to dry. You could buff up the little edges if you want to. I just plan on leaving them kind of that matte look. I think it's in keeping with kind of the overall rustic look of the piece. But you can add a little bit of hanging hardware, or you could leave it just as a bit of a shelf sitter. It just really depends upon the size, the shape, the look of your project. But it's kind of cute. You know, this, you know what? I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out, to tell you the truth. I hadn't made one before. I wasn't sure of my wood carving tools. I've only used them for rubber stamps, and they're fine for that. One of the blades, not the sharpest, not the sharpest little tool in the set. But this really didn't take long to do. Now, this is very soft wood. These are used for board breaking in Taekwondo. So they're very dry and they're not an overly wet wood. They're not a super hard wood. That would be probably part of my recommendation in terms of what's going to be a little bit easier to be able to carve out. I did this manually. I was thinking halfway through, gee, I wonder if my Dremel would do this. That would help make some of the detail a little bit easier and, might save a little bit. But really, this took me maybe about an hour and a half. Maybe about an hour and a half to carve out all of the details on it, albeit this was not super detailed, and that maybe made a difference too. I would always start with something a little bit easier until you get the knack. I got better at the carving out of it as I went along, and it was a lot faster. I liked having the black down to be able to see what I needed to remove. It made it easier for me to be able to differentiate. Again, kind of easy to tell because this is an easy pattern, but if you were doing something a little bit more involved, if you had a lot of detail with fine lines with trees, I mean, you could get a nice long board, you could do a whole mountain scene, tree scene, really any designer pattern that you want. You could just do somebody's name. It's kind of just a nice kind of rustic looking way to be able to go. I think it looks great in a cottage or a slightly more rustic environment. But again, you could zhuzh it up by changing out the black color and doing pink and then staining this in a pale white wash, perhaps. So really, you're not limited to just this look. Let me know what you think of this one, guys. As always, love to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Until then, take care.